Welcome to Mind Meets Body and Soul, a podcast that connects the dots between clinical mental health and spiritual holistic wellness. I'm Heather, a licensed clinical social worker and mental health guru.
And I'm Devon, a Reiki master, spiritual teacher, and lover of all things woo-woo. We're here to discuss various wellness topics, highlighting the connection between the mind, body, and soul.
We'll be offering nuggets of wisdom from each of our fields, with the ultimate goal of bridging the gap between our two worlds. Whether you lean more into cognitive psychology
or are guided by the ancient teachings of spirituality and energetics, our intention is to help you prioritize yourself and unlock a fresh perspective to healing, growth, and expansion. We're so excited you're here. Let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mind Meets Body and Soul. Devon here, coming to you from this cloudy, gloomy day. Heather, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Tired, have had a lot going on, so I'm just kind of like in all the feels today, but we're here, so that's nice.
We are here. I feel you on that. We're a little off schedule today. Normally we would have recorded this episode a little bit earlier because this one's actually going live on Tuesday, April 30th. So off schedule. Also not the episode that we thought that we would be scheduling at this time. I know for you, this has been a tough time for family. Do you want to share a little bit about what's been going on?
Sure. So I have experienced a loss, a death in the family. So last week was kind of just chaotic in navigating that loss and going through all of the motions, like logistically, but also the feelings that come along with the death of a loved one. So I'm coming off of the services. So definitely like lower energy and kind of just like I said, in all of the feels. And, we'll get into what we're talking about today. But I think there's just kind of this theme that I'm going through of loss and endings. And it's not an easy thing to be navigating, but in the theme of last week's episode of authenticity, I'm showing up and I'm here. And that's just where I am right now.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I'm so sorry to hear about this loss in your family. I know it's never easy, no matter how much you might feel like you're prepared for it or not. So I'm glad that you have been taking time for yourself, spending time with family. And then as we learn as well, life carries on, which is like the comforting yet also oftentimes sad part of navigating any type of ending.
Yeah. I mean, I think that endings like this one feel so final and it can be so difficult to like wrap your head around it. And I also, like, as a therapist, talk a lot about ending, and not only just like death ending, but like relationships ending, including like the therapeutic relationship ending. So I think having a conversation around endings is an important conversation to have, because it is part of showing up authentically and being a human and being on this planet. Is we do experience end, whether we can plan for it, it's a surprise to us, it's just part of this, duality that we talk about.
Yeah. So if you are, those who are listening, if you are experiencing some kind of ending, be it an actual death of family, friend, etc., just know that we see you. I do also want to quick shout out, little love note to one of our avid podcast listeners as well. She just experienced a death in her family, which is also my family. And so for that, I want to just extend love and condolences for any of our other listeners as well who might be experiencing this.
Yeah, I think it is something that unfortunately most of us can relate to some capacity. And we're just sending as much love and positive energy and thoughts as we can.
Before we get into the topic of this conversation, it feels like a good question to ask for you and for your family. What has been helpful for navigating this kind of whirlwind of time, right? Because you just ended the services from the past 2 days, and I always think about how like the real grieving process seems to come after these services. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about what's been helping you during this time, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I think it makes me think of the saying we've talked about before of be where your feet are. I think that grieving is like such a wild process and it looks so different for everyone. And I was talking last night with someone and, they said like a wave is hitting me. And I think that's a big part of it is that like you don't have to be grieving 24/7. It's okay to share positive memories and laughter and joy. And it's also okay to commiserate together and feel all of the like heavier, more sad, grieving emotions that come with it. So I think just like being where you are at any given moment is the best thing that I can say to do and the best way to honor the loss that you're grieving, to honor your own humanness and your own emotions. I think just be where you are, no matter where that is the best thing that I can say to do.
Always a helpful reminder. It's one that we have come back to time and again in this podcast of being where you are. And it speaks to not needing to force yourself to be anywhere you're not, right? We're not forcing a positivity here or asking you to, put a smile on and pretend like everything is okay. And it, the timing of it all, I mean, this conversation that we're about to have, that we're having, that we're about to have, it's not fun. It's not, oh, I think that some emotions are going to start to come too because because this really is not the conversation that either one of us anticipated having. And so I'll say it as emotions are beginning to well up. But this is actually going to be our last episode of Mind Meets Body and Soul.
Yeah. It is sad.
It is sad.
It's a loss here too for us. Devon, you and I, we've been on this journey and we've been deep in it. It's a loss for our listeners. So we're like quite literally all here together, like as we're recording this episode today of all days too. Like it's just all here.
Right. We are recording the final episode of Mind Meets Body and Soul. Definitely a lot earlier than either one of us anticipated. And it's not a bad thing, right? Like there's a reason why we are coming to the end of this journey together. It's just also like crazy timing that during this ending, we're also experiencing other endings, deaths in life right now. And it all feels a little much, to say the least.
It is a little much.
Ooh, so I got the first set of tears out just saying that out loud on this podcast. For those who are listening, this is our final episode.
What are the tears bringing up for you, if you don't mind sharing? I think that's something that comes up in therapy a lot. Like it's one thing when we think something or we know something, but it's a whole nother ball game when we're like saying it or speaking it into existence. So what was happening there when you were sharing that or saying that?
Endings are definitely, I mean, I think for everybody, but for me too, they hit me a little bit differently. They've always been a little harder for me. There's time and love and, energy that goes into anything that it is that we're doing, whether it be a project, a relationship, this podcast, and then you and me, our relationship. And so to say that we are coming to the end of this journey, that this is our last episode, I think that brings up that, like all endings for me, it feels hard. It feels emotional. It feels sad.
Yeah. I think it's very valid, of course, to feel sad. I mean, we've been pouring a lot into this podcast, and I say a million times a day, probably, like the more you care, the more you care. So we have a lot of love and energy that we poured into this podcast. We both care about each other on a personal level and obviously here in this relationship. So you care a lot. We care a lot. So we care a lot about the end of it too, like it just kind of sucks and it's okay that it sucks and
Yeah.
it's just kind of like part of it.
Right. Yeah. So, in the name of authenticity, And in doing hard things, we're going to be having a conversation on how we are navigating the ending of this journey. And of course, as we do, tying it back to how we show up in our fields, how we help our clients and community navigate through things like endings as well.
Ironically, in my world, I start the relationship by talking about the end of the relationship, just because I think it's something that tends to feel very taboo for people to talk about endings or breakups or like termination, as some people call it. I call it graduating from therapy because I just don't like the word termination. It just sounds
Right.
icky. But I start that relationship by saying, like, there's going to be an end here. And I'd love the opportunity to work through that together too. I think that a lot of people tend to just ghost us in this work and not want to have that ending because it's uncomfortable. I don't think it's something that we're used to having. I don't think it's necessarily always a bad thing. I just think it's unfamiliar to us to have like positive endings. Death is a really sad loss for a lot of people. A lot of times relationships, whether it be friendships or family dynamics or like partner relationships, they might end in a less than positive way. So I don't know that we're ever really taught or modeled how to properly end a relationship in like a civil, kind, friendly way. So I love that we're having this conversation because I think it is an important one to model, to share, to show that not all endings have to be bad endings. Sometimes endings can be peaceful too.
Right. It's not like I'm crying because this is a bad thing. Like there's nothing, there's no like hard feelings here. There's no like we are stopping this podcasting journey because something went wrong, right? Or anything bad happened. And that's an interesting take of like starting out a relationship by talking to the ending. I haven't necessarily thought of that, but it's true. Ideally, too, you say this all the time. Like, the goal of therapy is them not needing therapy anymore, right? Where they become their own self healer, where they become self sufficient in being able to take the toolbox of tools that you have given to them and apply them to their everyday life. And I think similarly, like we didn't talk about that when we started this podcast, but of course we knew that it wasn't going to be a forever thing, right? It was just a chapter, an adventure that we were taking on together. We had no idea what would come of it. With that, had no idea how long it would last. And here we are. The ending of it came much sooner than either one of us could have anticipated. But I'm with you too. I'm really grateful that we are also talking through it.
So, Devon, you are on the initiating side of this ending. So, would you be willing or mind walking us through like what that process looked like, how you came to this decision, and just share a little bit about your experience in ending this?
Yeah, it is a very weird feeling, Heather, because it truly has felt like a breakup of a relationship. And like it is, but it's not. The timing of it was terrible, as we'll get into as well. It also felt pretty foreign for me because I'm not used to being on that initiating side of ending relationships or ending things, especially when they don't feel like they've come like fully to the end of their time, at least not for me consciously. I don't know if that made any sense. But I had this realization a few weeks ago, and it was just a knowing in my head. I think my time with Mind, Needs, Body, and Soul, I think our journey is coming to an end. And when I had that realization, I was actually thinking back to what led up to that. And there were a lot of different mini moments, and I wasn't necessarily conscious of them. They weren't things that, like, they weren't problems that you and I were experiencing in this podcasting process, but I just felt myself being pulled in a different direction and wanting something different. And the thing is, like, we started this podcast a year ago, completely on the same page of what we wanted to bring into this, the podcast world, the kinds of conversations that we wanted to have, the value of bridging the gap between your clinical psychology world and my holistic spiritual energetics world. And we did exactly that. And I think I'm rambling on a little bit here, so I'll like kind of get to the point. But I found myself recently being pulled in a different direction. And the container that we have created with the intentions that we have created, it didn't fit anymore. And so receiving this intuitive hit that our time with this podcast was nearing its end, I didn't quite feel ready for it consciously, but I also knew that there was something deeper within that I was like, okay, this does feel right. And thus, we had the hard conversation.
I can relate a lot to what you're saying in that I have felt in the past like I've outgrown relationships, and not to put words in your mouth that that's exactly what you're saying here, but it feels like that's how I was feeling when I was in certain relationships and felt like I was outgrowing them. They weren't like in alignment with what I was wanting or needing in life anymore. And I have found those relationships the most devastating for me to end because I knew that I had to hurt someone in the process, and there wasn't anything necessarily wrong. There wasn't, is there a thumb above my
Yes.
head? Wow. What was that?
I've seen that sometimes where people like will go like that and it'll create an emoji.
How creepy.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think sometimes the relationships where it's just like we're outgrowing something are oftentimes, in my experience, the hardest relationships that I've had to end, because there is still so much love and care, and there's nothing necessarily wrong. It's just this like feeling that I'm having where it's no longer in alignment. And I think that can feel really hard to like it's almost like this like, oh, like I don't want no brain, like I don't want to have this thought, or I don't want to have this like aha moment, or it now I'm rambling, but I get what you're saying, and I do think it's just really hard, and sometimes the most devastating to end these types of relationships that have served us well for so long. There's nothing wrong, there's nothing bad, there's nothing toxic. It's just like we're ready to like step into something new, and that can be really hard. So I'm just sending you compassion and love, because I've been in similar positions and I know how like gut-wrenching it can feel to have to be the one to say the hard things.
Thank you, Heather. And the level of compassion that you have for me having ended this, having been the initiating part to ending this journey and this relationship, it says a lot about you and also the time and space that you've taken to process this, because I know that it wasn't easy to be on the receiving end. It's never easy to be on the receiving end of an ending of a breakup. And so what was that experience like for you? Would you mind sharing that?
I definitely feel like I went through levels of it. Like the first one being shock and just trying to like process and digest the information. I think once I got a grip on that this was the case and this was the reality, I think, my ego was kind of like, well, is it me? What did I do? Like, is there something that I did to cause this? And then I think, we had an offline conversation where there was lots of tears and lots of emotion. And I think I've come to terms with it. I'm at peace with it. I am sad. I don't think that I said this to you. Like, I don't know that I feel that we allowed this space to run its course. And also I know enough to like respect your boundaries and your needs. And I think that's where this duality is of like, I don't have to agree with the decision to respect you and yours. And two things can exist at the same time. And it's been a lot of me trying to hold space for both and really juggling two seemingly conflicting feelings.
Yeah, no, really well said. And I appreciate and honor you so much for all of it. I mean, of course, we've talked from the beginning of this podcast of how refreshing this relationship has been because we're both coming at it from like the standpoint of mental health and, self love and self care and just like healthy relationship perspective. And so it doesn't surprise me that we've been able to navigate the ending of this relationship, of this partnership in a very similar, healthy way. But that doesn't mean it hasn't been hard. And so I thank you for your openness and your receptivity and your acceptance of something, even when, especially when it's something that does make you feel sad and that does not feel totally ready to be completed on your end.
I think it's been a wild, like, practice what I preach experience. And I can totally say that I understand when it's uncomfy for our clients because it has been uncomfy for me too, and still important and valid and necessary.
Yeah, no, thank you. And we mentioned this in the beginning, or I mentioned this in the beginning. The timing was terrible. That truly, truly terrible. Talking about timing, I had this realization that this was happening on, I think it was like a Wednesday. When did you go to the Bachelorette?
Thursday.
Okay. So it was on a Wednesday. I was on this hike because I could just feel like there was this turmoil in my head. I was like, I need to get into a different environment so that I can piece together what it is that I'm feeling. On this hike, it became clear to me that this is what was happening. And in my head, on the way home from the hike, I was like, all right, I'm going to text Heather now. No, I'm going to wait until I get home from the hike so I'm not in the moving car, and I'm going to ask to have a conversation. But then I got caught up when I got home with a work related project, and then it was too late for me to text her, and I was like, I'll text her tomorrow. And then wouldn't you know, the next day comes and Heather texts me, and it's our podcast anniversary.
Yeah. It was a whole big long, like, happy anniversary. Like, I can't believe this whole year. Uh, so it was kind of, the timing was definitely wild, I'd say.
Yeah, it was really shitty timing. And that's like, you and I often talk about how we are our own best case studies. Ooh, emotions coming again. How we are our own best case studies. And so it feels like unfair that it had to happen this way. And also, I know that it happened this way so that we could experience it, process it, and then show up for our clients, our communities. We talked last 2 weeks ago, I think, in the authenticity episode about modeling behavior that we want to see in the world. So when I'm thinking about how I would like to see people navigate endings and breakups, this is exactly it. But that doesn't mean it's hard. And my goodness, the emotions are coming out.
Yeah. And I think that's what we were saying with the authenticity episode too. We were talking about authenticity with boundaries, but also, like, authenticity isn't always love and light and happy and joy. Like, the whole point of that entire episode was to acknowledge this kind of stuff, the raw, real, hard, icky, uncomfy parts of our human experience. You say it often that we're just messily stumbling. So we are here truly, authentically showing up and messily stumbling through this ending together. And that's okay too.
We are indeed messily stumbling through this very raw and real experience. And, we spoke to authenticity here in this moment too. And another piece of authenticity, I think, is like looking at it the way that I acted, the way that you acted too. It would have felt inauthentic for me to ignore this feeling and this knowing that I had, and to continue showing up for podcast recordings, like acting like all of me was in it when I knew that I was quickly being pulled in a different direction. And likewise, I really recognize like the authenticity in you who responded exactly how you did, like shocked, a little confused, upset, whereas a part of you could have been like, sure, fine, it's all good. So I really appreciated how you responded, the whole wave of things, with that shock and sadness, and also with that acceptance and that respect, and also with that love.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it takes a lot. And there were moments, I think, and I say moments because I really do feel like I've done enough work in my life to understand that this wasn't my true feeling. But there were like moments of anger and frustration and annoyance too. And I was able to like recognize when those flared up and then reel it back into the sadness, the disappointment, the hurt that was behind it. Like I really do truly feel like some of those more high energy, frustrated, angry emotions, the more pointed emotions are really just like our shield or our mask, and the softer stuff's behind it. So as soon as those came up momentarily, I was like, okay, wait, there's like more here. Let me dig a little deeper. And then I was able to show up with those softer, more vulnerable feelings, which takes courage and isn't easy to do, but makes this dynamic a lot more like it functions better, in that like you can meet me in that sadness and that hurt, rather than if I was like, yeah, all right, Devon, like bye, like talk to you never, like
Right.
that warrants a different response.
This is truly probably the weirdest conversation I've ever had, or weirdest podcast episode that we've ever created. That's for sure. But what you're sharing about that experience too, it makes me think of, I mean, this whole podcast has been about bringing awareness to all the parts of ourselves, bringing awareness to our thoughts, feelings, actions, our, ego, our typical reactions, choosing more self loving, kind ones. And so, of course, we're putting it all into practice through this experience here. And I really do honor and see the part of you that was, having those thoughts of like, did I do anything wrong? Is there anything I could have done better? And like, I wouldn't also blame you if there were some like, you know, critical thoughts towards me, because that's what our ego does in those moments. Our ego looks to point the finger every which way and be like, they did something wrong. And then it points the finger at itself and it's like, I did something wrong. And really, nobody did anything wrong. The reality of this situation and the reality of many relationships, I'm not going to say all, of course, but the reality of many relationships is like, as you said, like we grow in different directions, we evolve, we expand. And with that, our desires, our wants, our needs, they change. And that's simply what happened here.
And I don't want this to all be sad and doom and gloom either, because I do feel like now that we've both had some time to process this and digest this, I think there's also like, it reminds me a lot of what I just went through in this loss. Like, yes, we're sad and we're grieving. And also, we went through pictures and we shared memories and joy. And I think like I'd love for us to have time to do that here too, because this has been awesome. And that's why I'm sad, because this has been such a cool year. And I would have never thought, if you told 5 year ago Heather, 3 year ago Heather, that she'd have a podcast, I wouldn't believe you. And here we are, having had a podcast, done it a whole year, grown, learned, laughed, cried, like all of the things. I think we've made an impact here. And that's why we're sad. But I'd also love to like spend time talking about what we learned and the things that we shared in this year too, because it's not just sad, it's been beautiful too.
Absolutely. And thank you for shifting the energy of the conversation, because it has. There has been so many beautiful things, and we will absolutely end the episode on that positive note. If you're okay with this, before we move into that, I would love to just offer, as we do, a helpful tip tool for our audience who might be navigating endings in whether it be a relationship, an environment, a situation, a job, etc. Is there something that you would like to offer?
I think what you did really well and what I have done when I've been in a similar position is I really wanted to dig deep and get to the roots of where this was coming from. I think whenever I'm talking to someone about like setting boundaries, and I guess an ending is a really big, really hard boundary that you're setting. So I think the tip tool that I would have is like really try to understand the why behind why it is that you want this ending or why you need this ending so that you can then communicate that to that person. You said a few months ago that you don't need to have an explanation. No is enough. No is an answer. But I do think when you care about someone and you have to end that relationship, I do think sometimes they deserve that explanation in these situations. So I think if you can spend time noodling on your why, then you show up more prepared to navigate that conversation in a productive and like peaceful way rather than just saying like no it's over period. It's like you can not emphasize, you can elaborate on where you're coming from and help them get an understanding, and then I think they can meet you in understanding rather than just like period.
I'm with you there. I mean, that is such a testament to the work that we do so that we can show up in that way because it's such a gray area. There's such a fine line but between like feeling like you need to over explain yourself and defend your decision versus, as you just said, like giving insight as to why you are making this decision, which helps the other person. So thank you for highlighting that. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I think insight is the perfect word because I agree. I don't think we need to over explain, but I do think it's helpful for us and them to share that insight into like where it is that we're coming from and give them answers so that the ego doesn't have to like wonder and try to point as many fingers when we have some answers. So,
Yes, we often don't do well when we have to fill in the blanks. And so as much like transparency as you can give, it's helpful for both parties. And again, finding the balance between truth and transparency versus like over explaining or not sharing anything at all. It's hard to find that balance. So we're not encouraging or suggesting perfection here, but it's something to definitely work towards whenever we're navigating some kind of ending.
agreed. What would you share? What would be your tip or nugget of wisdom here?
I think to go off of this as well, you spoke to the communication part of this, and I think I want to speak to the like emotional support side of this as well. Number one priority, of course, is tending to ourselves, making sure that we are giving ourselves what we need emotionally, right? Like this was a hard decision for me, clearly, but I needed to take into account everything that I was feeling, everything that I was thinking about, everything that I was experiencing. And then at the same time, of course, because I care about you and I care about this relationship that we've had across the past year, we've invested so much shared energy into this journey. Then I'm also going to take into account your emotions as well and like approach this ending with a lot of care for you too, without abandoning my own self, right? Because it would have been easy. And I think I can see this in so many different scenarios where it's like you go to set that boundary with another person, you go to express what you're feeling, and then they have this emotional reaction, and it makes you like, I mean, for me, like it made me feel bad that I was even thinking of like and acting on this ending when I saw how you reacted. And I think sometimes we can have a tendency to then like want to take it back. Or other people might have another approach where they're like, all right, sucks to be them, good luck. And so it's finding that middle balance between caring for yourself, prioritizing your feelings, and also showing up in a loving, supportive way for the person on the other end of that relationship. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I think that's one of the number one challenges that people experience in setting boundaries or ending things is the reaction that you get, which is real, and we can't control another person's reaction. And I think if we can prepare ourselves for that, but still understand where we're coming from and the validity of where we're coming from, I think it's really important, which is why I do so much work with people before they even start to set a boundary, in getting curious of their why and understanding that insight. Again, not because you have to over explain, but I think it's helpful for you to be able to stand confidently in the decision that you're making and where you're coming from and the validity of your needs too. Because here we are having different opinions and different reactions to this ending. And like, I could have fought back, right? And been like, no, Devon, like, it's not over. I don't want it to be over. I don't agree with this decision. But then, like you said, that opens its own can of worms and makes it hard. So I really think like taking it slow, being in the emotion is also helpful and insightful and important.
Yeah, thank you. And before we switch gears here too, I remember in a past episode when we spoke about boundaries, you spoke to like creating a plan for yourself or having your clients create a plan for themselves. And yeah, go into this kind of situation or any kind of, for that matter, any kind of interaction with another person with a plan for yourself or a blueprint of like, okay, these are this is the intention, these are the facts, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm ready to take action towards. The response, the reaction and the response from another person is a wild card. It could go any which way. And so I want to create a plan for myself so that at the end of the day, I know how I'm going to handle, respond to their reaction or response. And what does that do? It just instills safety for the self.
Yeah, I always say when it comes to boundary setting, plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Yeah.
It is a total wild card what their reaction will be. And I just want, it doesn't make what their reaction doesn't make where you're coming from any less real or valid. It just makes it hard. It's a really hard dynamic on both parts. Me being the one receiving the ending or receiving your boundary, it sucked. And I also know that having done this work, it sucked for you to have to deliver it to me too. So like, I think a lot of compassion here too, if we can try to hold space for even just an ounce of that, can be helpful also.
What a mature conversation this has been, Heather. Thank you so much. I love you.
Right back at you. I know this is hard and we're going to get through it. We will. And I love you right back.
Thank you. So let's switch gears now because, yes, we have a few more minutes left in this recording, and I would love to end on a very positive note because this podcast journey has been everything that I could have asked for. While it has ended earlier than I would have even anticipated, truly, our intention for this podcast, our shared intention for this podcast from the start to now, the ending really has filled my hopes and expectations. And there's a lot of goodness, as you said, to look back on.
Yeah, we both have access to a shared note where we've been keeping feedback, and it's been inspiring us and been really helpful. So I feel like it's timely for us to take a look back and see, I mean, the feedback from our giveaway, but also just feedback over this past year, a little over a year. So is there anything that you're seeing or anything
You know what I was
specific
gonna
you want to share? Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna ask you first if you'll actually announce our giveaway winner and read their review for the podcast. Again, feels a little weird to be doing this on our last episode, but we had many great submissions, and so I would really love to announce that winner. You have it pulled up on your screen, I think. So why don't you share her review, and then we'll give her details for us getting in touch with her.
Yes. So we did get a lot of really great feedback, and it's been really cool, sad, but really cool to like look over it and read all of it. So the winner for our giveaway is Shar Styles. And this came through, this is a YouTube subscriber. And they shared their review says outstanding podcast and hosts. I love the topics, especially the relationship ones. I gain insights as I do my homework and I listen. Much love and support with a bunch of
Mm,
hearts.
I love that. Thank you so much, Shar. That was such a lovely review. We're so happy that you've been listening to these episodes while doing homework. Definitely makes doing homework a little bit maybe more fun, more interesting. And these episodes aren't going anywhere, people. Like, we're not deleting the podcast. You can still come back to any of our 50, what is it, 52, 53 episodes at any time. Heather, is there anything you want to respond to with that?
I just think it's really cool to know that this listener, neither of us knew and just stumbled across our podcast. And that's exactly what we were hoping to do, is make these conversations accessible and reach a wider net than just the clients that we work with. So I think it speaks to what we've been talking about and the conversations that we've been having. Like you said, they're not going anywhere. I still am going to be assigning episodes for homework to some of my clients to listen to because it's impactful and important. And I have a feeling they'll find benefit from it even years from now. So it's cool that it gets to live on.
It is really cool. All right, Heather. So as we close out, why don't we each pick two? Does that feel good to pick two of the feedback? I love that we've been screenshotting these and, again, they'll live on and we'll still get to refer back to them because this has been a great journey from start to finish.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's really cool to see all of these things. And, these things that you have all shared have resonated with us and also will live on for us. So do you want to go first since I just shared?
Sure. So this one's actually in response to, I think it was like the vision board end of the episode message that you had given. Somebody wrote, "That was such a gift. I needed this reminder today to think happy, not crappy, and for all that you and your co-host shared. Great episode. So proud of you. So cute. Thank you."
Oh, I love Think Happy Not Crappy. I forgot about that.
Was that on a post-it note? Yeah, a
Mm-hmm.
poop. Wasn't it like a poop?
Elephant poop paper.
Elephant poop
Yes.
paper, which then I bought in Boulder, Colorado very soon
Mm-hmm.
after.
Yeah.
Synchronistic experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. All right. What's another one that we have in here that calls to you?
I have one here. It was a Spotify review. It says, "Great episode. You guys are really coming together. I myself had a lot of oh wow moments while listening. Keep up the great work. Can't wait till next week."
Mm, this is a great
I
review.
know.
Thank
It's cute.
you. Yes. Yeah, I loved that. The wow, oh wow moments, the aha moments. We had a lot of comments, a lot of feedback throughout this past year of little like light bulb moments for our listeners. So I love that. Let's
Yeah.
see. Another one that I want to highlight. I think again this was in response to you. Somebody had messaged you directly and they said, "I listened to episode 6 this morning and just wanted to tell you I loved it. It got me out of a little funk. Lucky girl syndrome." So this was our episode 6 lucky girl syndrome conversation that we shared. I remember I was explaining this weird phenomenon I was experiencing of getting things for free and getting the best
Mm-hmm.
parking spots. And we dove into confirmation bias, self fulfilling prophecy, and also my spiritual tie in of lucky girl syndrome and energetics of, I think it was law of resonance and law of manifestation.
Mm-hmm. We've had so many good episodes this year, and it's cool to like even look back and remember all the conversations that we had, because we had truly so many, 53. So it is fun to remember like the details or look back and see all the things that we talked about. It's cool.
It really is. Yeah. 53 conversations, and yet somehow they were all interconnected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. What's the last one that you want to highlight?
I think the last one that I'll share is one that says, Out of everything, I'm just trying to heal my heart. That's why I'm super grateful that your latest episode came out when it did. I was like, damn, I really needed to hear this. So healing.
Mm. The timeliness of all of these episodes, I really do think that they came out at perfect times for our listeners, or even if, our listeners weren't listening to them exactly at the time that it went live, whenever they found themselves listening to it, it always happened to be the perfect conversation. So, what an honor that we've been able to share these conversations and, reach our listeners at the most perfect times, most aligned times for them. I'm so proud of us, Heather.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for introducing this to me. I never would have had the thought download of doing a podcast. So it never would have started if it weren't for you. And I'm truly very appreciative of that.
And likewise, I would never have started a podcast unless I had done it with you. There truly was no other reality. And through this process, through this year, you and I have learned so much of what it takes to run a podcast, start a podcast, run a podcast, the energy that goes into it, the commitment, and then, the heartfelt conversations that we're having. And, just one last thing that I want to add into, you've mentioned this in past conversations, and I've mentioned it, that sharing these conversations together week after week has made us so much more mindful and conscious. We live in the present moment, looking around us, making connections, reflecting, on experiences that we're having, and then connecting over them. And that is one of, aside from, of course, our listeners feeling impacted by the conversations that we're having on that personal level, I feel like I have grown and evolved and expanded so much thanks to you and these conversations that we've shared in this space week after week for the past year.
Yeah, I mirror all of that. I mean, I think you have taught me so much and I've grown so much. Our guests that we've had on have left me with new insight and wisdom. And I think it's just been such an amazing, expansive, aligned experience up to this point. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to be a part of it.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you also for bringing in a nice shout out to our guests. Thank you to each and every one of our guests on this podcast. Thank you to our listeners. Of course, none of this podcasting journey experience would have been what it was without all of the pieces of the whole. Usually we end, I think we've gotten away from it, but we were ending our episodes with a vision board citing. I think it would be fitting if we both picked something from our vision board to send off our audience with and to close out this journey of mind meets body and soul.
Yeah. I have something already, if you don't mind
Yeah,
me
go ahead.
jumping in.
No, go ahead.
It's on my personal vision board and it's a picture of a car on driving through mountains and it says a road trip to remember.
That's perfect. I love that. This has
Yeah.
been a road trip to remember. From the moment that we had that Instagram live in January of last year
Mm-hmm.
to me reaching out to you and saying that I had an idea,
Yeah.
to our photo shoot, all the research that you did for us in the beginning of the podcast, to the like twice weekly meets that we were having, and like truly every moment conversation since. It's been, what was it? A road trip to remember?
A road trip to remember.
Beautiful. Well, mine is not going to be as poetic. It's truly just a single word, but it's in like cool, funky orange and yellow letters. And it says thankful.
Yeah. In all ways, like so much gratitude and so thankful for you. And like we said, our listeners, our guests, every moment we've had, the tech issues and glitches that we've overcome, like all of it. I'm just so thankful. Like my heart is really so full.
Yeah. This was such a great way to end. Thank you, Heather, for reminding us that we wanted to bring in this like lighthearted gratitude and review of all this journey has been. I feel like in a way we're just keeping talking to postpone the ending of this.
Yeah.
It's not, it's an ending, but it's not like the end. Like
Yeah.
neither one of us knows what the future holds, where we're going. I have zero doubt that this is the end of us ever jumping on a recorded video session, whatever, and it being somewhere out in the ethers.
Yeah.
So
I think,
stay tuned, everybody.
yeah, right. I think it's just the end of a chapter, like the end of this road trip, the end of this piece of the journey, but like it's not all over. Life goes on, things continue on. Enlighten and Empower is growing and expanding, growing mindset therapy. Like there's lots of things on the horizon, but we just have to like let this go in order to grow into those things too. So,
Well said. Well, Heather, thank you a million times over.
right back at you.
Don't worry, listeners. Heather and I are getting together for lunch or dinner sometime soon so we can properly celebrate in person. But this
Yeah.
is the sign off for the episode, for the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you to everyone, every single person involved, and all love.
All love. Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye. We are so glad that you took the time to share this space with us. We'll be releasing new episodes of Mind Meets Body and Soul every Tuesday, so be sure to give us a follow and share this podcast with those you love.
To connect with us and join our communities, head to the show notes where you'll find our contact information and individual websites. Until next week, stay grounded, keep growing, and trust that everything you seek is unfolding for you.